Okay, good morning and welcome to this morning's meeting of Dmrc. This will be held under the Council's hybrid protocols, so if I could remind elected members who are remote, they must keep their camera on. If you want to speak, put up your electronic hand, and if you want to speak in the chamber, put up your actual hand. So we'll just move to, and the meeting will be recorded and broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. If we can move to apologies and substitutes.
Acting Convener, no apologies.
I think we have with Councillor Beattie, I think, who maybe hasn't put his apologies in, but he's on holiday, so if we could just record him as absent. And declarations of interest and statements of transparency. Seeing anything there at all. The minutes of the previous meeting, we've got two meetings minutes, the 31st of October and the 4th of November. Are they a correct record? Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll move on to the first case this morning, item 4, which is 8 Russell Street, Montrose. And I'll ask Mr. Christensen to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Can members see the slides okay? Okay, good morning members. I'm Paul Christensen of the Development Plan team of Angus Council, present today as Independent Planning Advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I've had no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of the Dmrc seeks review of the refusal of an application for planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house at 8 Russell Street, Montrose. The application site measures approximately 140 square metres and is located adjacent to Russell Street and comprises land enclosed by walls on 4 sides, sitting to the rear of garden ground, serving property on Palmerston Street. Russell Street is located in the Montrose Conservation Area. The site is located to the north of Russell Street, where access will be taken, and there is garden ground serving property on Palmer Street to the east and south of this proposed site. A lane serving the rear of the properties on Palmerston Street and Melville Gardens is located to the west, with residential property beyond. Montrose Academy is located north of Russell Street. The application proposes the erection of a detached single-storey L-shaped 2-bedroom dwelling with a ridged roof. The new house would occupy a footprint of approximately 76 square metres, leaving around 42 square metres of garden ground to provide 2 car parking spaces, bin storage and private amenity space. An air source heat pump would be located sited to the east elevation of the proposed house. Vehicular access into the site would continue to be provided via the existing access onto Russell Street. The house would connect to the public water supply and to the public drainage network for foul drainage. The proposed surface water drainage arrangements are as yet unknown, but the application form indicated that sustainable drainage would not be utilised. Turning to the slides. First slide is obviously a location plan. The site application site is indicated in red. Russell Street is to the north. Montrose Academy is immediately beyond that. And sitting in behind the application site are the garden ground for the properties along Palmerston Street. The small lane that connects the garden grounds between Melville Gardens and Palmerston Street again sits to the east of that, and you can see Melville Gardens again beyond. The proposed site plan shows an L-shaped proposed dwelling, and it shows the area which would be parking area indicated here by the cursor. Garden ground for Palmerston Street, and these are all gardens for properties in Palmer Street sitting beyond to the east and south. The proposed elevations, again, we just see how the proposed dwelling would look. The north elevation shows this would be the view from Russell Street. It shows the L-shaped dwelling, and it shows the area in front here, indicated again by the cursor, would be the area where the parking area would be. The east elevation, again, this is the area that would be seen from the rear of the properties, the garden areas on Palmerston Street. The west elevation and south elevation dominated by the boundary wall, which would remain. The proposed ground floor plan, it just shows basically a layout of how the dwelling would operate. We have two bedrooms located to the north, a kitchen lounge area to the east, and as I said, the two parking area, the amenity area, which would be used for parking, again sits to the south, with Palmerston Street Gardens would be sitting in beyond here where my cursor is showing. An aerial view, unfortunately, this aerial view is a little bit blurry, but it shows, again, just a location of where the proposed site sits in relation to Russell Street, Palmerston Street and Melville Gardens, and this area is all enclosed within the Montrose Conservation Area. A key consideration of when the application was originally determined was obviously the character of the area. These are the properties along Palmerston Street, which are again predominantly residential. The properties are hard on the heel of the footpath, and you can see the sort of the general character of those houses sitting within the conservation area. On the opposite side, we have Melville Gardens, again residential properties, and they're generally hard against the footpath, although some have there are larger plots, so there are area of garden ground in front of these. Again, sits within the conservation area. Montrose Academy, this is the view which we get directly to the north of the proposed site, obviously a school building, but this part of the academy sits within the conservation area. Looking at the proposed site, this is a view from the site looking from Russell Street. You can see the existing access to the site, and obviously the wall that you can see immediately in front of you, and beyond the wall, as I say, quite a contained site within that area. Again, this is a similar view just further up the street. Looking back, it shows the wall of within the proposed site, on bounds the proposed site, and it shows the path linking the properties to the rear of Palmerston Street and Melville Gardens, providing access to those garden areas. Looking within the proposed site, when I visited the site, access was limited, and this image is taken from the applicant's design and access statement. It shows the area of land within the proposed site. The area in front of you, I understand, was previously a building which was an outbuilding which was demolished sometime in around about 2009 or just beyond 2009. Again, distinctive within this area is obviously the boundary walls, which would be retained. The application, so this image in front of you now, the application site sits beyond this wall area here, indicated by my cursor. This is within the garden ground immediately to the south of the application site, and it's with the garden ground for property on Palmerston Street. And again, it shows a garden area, and it shows some outbuildings, sort of some small scale outbuildings enclosed within the wall, obviously to give them some some additional storage space for outdoor activity. Convener, that convenes the presentation. All the papers relevant to the case are in front of members.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr Christensen. Have we got any questions for Mr Christensen initially? Councillor Darnell?
Okay, thanks, Mr Christensen. What I'd like to ask is that why do we have to have the allocation for 2 parking spaces? Because on NP4 policy 17, no, sorry, I'm on the wrong one here. The DS3 under no car parking will be supported, particularly in urban locations that are well sustainable transport modes. With it being in the town, why does it have to have 2? Is that the applicant that's insisting on the 2, or is that the planning that's insisting on the 2?
Thanks, Councillor Darnell. I think the request has come from the road service, so it's probably appropriate to refer to Mr Barnes for that question.
Yeah, Mr Barnes, I was going to ask the same question, so if you can give us the roads review on this one.
Morning, Convener, thanks. Yes, it comes from the Council's parking standards. There is allowance within the there is flexibility within the parking standards to reduce the requirement for parking in locations where there are good links to public transport. So members may wish to balance that in their decision.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Barnes. I guess, going back to Councillor Darnell, we have to look at the planning application in front of us, and that's the way it's drawn up. But you know, most of the houses in that area in Palmerston Street, they're all parking on street, and the same with Russell Street. So this would actually is unusual in that there's off-street parking. But we've got the application in front of us, so I think so.
That's correct, Convener. The character of the area is very much properties hard against the footway with no parking allocated. So again, it's a balance that members may wish to take that into consideration before making their decision.
Okay, thanks, Mr Barnes. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. Mine follows on exactly from that. I was going to ask a similar question about the parking space, but mine was just regarding outside amenity space and the kind of regulations around that, because obviously this is a 2-bedroom kind of house, and it details the amount of amenity space that would be required to make it acceptable. But we also have flats that we approve. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about kind of what the ins and outs are of what we should consider in the regulations around outside space and the expectations there.
That one, Mr Christensen.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dorn. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's appropriate. I think in most circumstances, there obviously there are the character of the flats around those areas. There are still gardening areas in to the rear, so I think. I'm not entirely sure of the makeup of Palmerston Street in terms of, I think there are some flats and maybe upper floors in there, but they still have a relatively, I think it's the character of the area based upon the fact it's in the conservation area. I think that's what the concern has been. So I think that's probably a key consideration, is that the properties along Palmerston Street and Melville Gardens all have a relatively, they still have adequate sort of amenity space into the rear, and I think what the concern is in terms of the report of handling, what it suggests is that obviously the house would be the area that would be left would be really small, which is not really incongruous with what's already there within both Melville Gardens and Palmerston Street.
Have we got any other questions for Mr Christensen? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much. What's the main reasons the council are objecting to this?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. I think the principal reason is I think it's the site is obviously located in the conservation area, and I think the main concern has been that the type of development is incongruous with the character of that conservation area. As Mr Barnes has indicated, and also in the presentation that I showed, predominantly the residential properties front onto the streets of Palmerston Street, certainly within the immediate area, Palmerston Street, Russell Street, and also Melville Gardens. They're relatively hard against the heel of the footpath. There's not been any sort of, there are no sort of backland, if you like, want to call it that, housing developments within those garden areas. And I think the general feeling, certainly from the report of handling and the officer's original decision, is that form of development would be incongruous with the character of the area, and also for the Montrose, for that part of the conservation area. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Mr Christensen. Do members feel they've got enough information to determine this appeal at the moment? Everyone seems to feel they've enough information. Okay, so I'll maybe just go round the table and ask people what their thoughts are on this one. Do you want to start, Councillor Durno?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, this. I actually don't have any problem with the actual usage of the land for planning a new house. The problem I do have is with the design of the house, because obviously the parking spaces are taking up quite a lot of room, and the fact that the windows would face onto the stone boundary walls. Also, the design quality in place, I just feel, as I said, the amenities of a surrounding area. So my thoughts would be that I would be actually going with officers in this one and not letting the planning application go through. But if the planning application came back with a different design, I would be more supportive, because I just feel that they're giving too much space up to the car parking and not taking into consideration the look of the property, or the fact that the boundary walls, people won't be able to see out the windows. So I'm not happy with the design, but I am okay with the actual idea of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's clear. Thanks. Councillor Dorn?
Yeah, thank you. Similar, really. I think I'm supportive of housing that makes use of spaces that may not have been used for housing in previously, and I think it's good to use spaces like that. But I think perhaps this one isn't quite right for that area. So I agree with the officer's assessment that they've got on this. So that's where I sit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholl?
Thank you, Convener. I do find the application very compact and bijou, and it would be almost pretty alien to the rest of the street in this conservation area, and I would have to agree with the officers and refuse this application.
Okay, thanks. And Councillor McLaren?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I would agree with the officers. It's contrary to a number of policies, and it would not create a satisfactory residential environment. So I would refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I had a quick look at this site a few days ago, and I think the slides show you Melv Gardens, which is big houses, you know, then the town hall, and then there's some quite nice sort of townhouses at the far end of it. And then you saw Palmerston Street, which is terraced. There's not a lot of ground, because the front ones, there's main door flats, and then you go through a close and up circular stairs, sort of open stairs, you know, open, not covered stairs to get access to flats. So that's the kind of layout on Palmerston Street. And Russell Street's a little bit of a, it's not like either of those. You've got Montrose Academy on one side, which is not architecturally particularly attractive, I think you could say. It's the extension, it's not the original building. And then you've got some small houses further up Russell Street. So, and then there's the back lane. So it's not quite the same as looking at Melville Gardens. I would be very sympathetic to it personally. I think it is clearly brownfield site. There's no argument about that. You can see the building that was there before. Presumably it was some sort of outbuilding or something. I think MPF 4 does support brownfield development. We have got a housing crisis, so I would personally would have been sympathetic. Obviously, I'm in the minority. I think the point that Councillor Durno was a good one, and obviously roads have pushed the developer into allowing 2 spaces, which probably one would be quite sufficient. But I think it probably is one that, if with a more sensitive development, might, there might, it might be suited, because it does seem a bit of a shame. It is land that is just not being used. It's a town centre site, and we are encouraging people to live and work in, live in town centres, and this is a bit of land that's clearly has not been used for decades. So for me, it's a bit of a shame, but clearly the committee are clear in their views that we should refuse the appeal. So really, just for the record, the planning application 23/00433/full is the appeal is not upheld for the reasons in the paper. We'll move on now to the next item, which is item 5, which is better get it. Yeah, not the one in. Okey-doke. Item 5, which finding it. Land at Flock Loans in Invergowrie, and ask Mr. Christensen to take us through that one.
Thank you, Convener. Just prior to sort of putting the slides on, I just wanted to draw to your attention that looking through the papers, it appeared to me that there was new information had been submitted, which I don't think had been considered previously.
Yes, I did catch that. Do you just want to take us through what that new information is?
I'll try to. I'll refer to the. I've got page numbers for the hard copies for members that are in the chamber, and I've also got page numbers for the PDF for maybe Councillor Dorn, who's at home, if that helps. So I think it's on page 37 of the hard copy papers, which is page 66 on the PDF of the file, Councillor Doran. That shows the original site plan, and there's obviously the one of interest is the area where it shows the area of trees. If you turn to page 164 in the hard copy of the papers, which is page 94 in the PDF, Councillor Doran, it shows a new plan that has been submitted as part of the appeal, which appears to show more areas of trees. So I think members will have to consider whether they want to accept that new information in this consideration. There are a couple of caveats, I think, to point out in that, and obviously there's the site plan which shows the trees and shows the trees that would be removed. However, there's still no information about what those types of trees are. The plan that's shown, it's not clear whether what it's actually showing, whether it's a canopy area or a root protection area. My instinct tells me it's a canopy area, but again, there's no confirmation of that. There's still...
Mr. Christensen, can I just stop you there?
Sorry.
Just so that we're absolutely sure we're looking at the right page. You're saying this is 164 in the combined papers, is that right? So
I think that's right, yes.
That's the slide with 3 house designs at the top, and then a plan below with the layout of the proposed new houses, the existing 10 houses, and you're seeing the sort of markings of fields, etc. round about. Is that the right one?
And it should show the tree areas.
The tree area with several trees marked in red.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the plan says. I think the plan says revision C at the bottom of it.
That's right. It is.
Yeah.
It's revision C. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that, as I say, there's a couple of things just to sort of mention on that. I think, you know, that information I think would be material to the case. I think members will just need to be happy that they consider that the trees that are shown are as an accurate representation of what's actually on the ground, because there was some concern on the previous plan, which I'd refer to, which is on page 37 of the combined papers, in relation to the accuracy of that plan. And also, as I said to you previously, there's still no information in terms of like a tree survey or a root protection survey, just to sort of quantify what those trees are and what impacts there might actually be. So I think it's just to sort of mention that at this early stage. And aligned to that as well, following the site visit, which we'll see in the slides in a moment, a number of those trees were particularly along the road frontage, are mature. I would suggest are mature trees. So again, if those trees are to be removed, there's no information in terms of European sort of protected species surveys in relation to those. So it's just to sort of make that clear at the moment. In your consideration, whether you want to accept this information as new information.
I mean, clearly here, this is an outline planning application, isn't it? It's not detailed. So I guess, are we happy to accept that new information?
It's obviously not a detailed application, convener, but if obviously you're looking at the principle of development and the removal of trees, or what impact those trees might currently have in terms of both the setting, in terms of the setting of the site, and also in terms of any proposal for a house going in place, potentially could impact the principle as well. So it's just sort of, I think it's important to mention that.
Okay, thanks for that. Are we happy to take that new information? Okay, I think we are. Okay, well, we'll just go ahead then, Mr. Chris, and we'll accept that new information.
I'll just start the slides then, convener. Thank you again, convener. Again, I can confirm I have had no previous involvement in the application, and that I have had no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant, or any interested party. The case in front of members of DMRC seeks review of the refusal of an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of 2 dwelling houses on land at Flock Loans in Vagowdy. The application site measures approximately 3,550 square metres and is located west of an existing grouping of 10 residential properties. The proposed site is garden ground, and this is confirmed in the planning application form. The proposed site plan indicates access will be taken from the public road to the north and shows the indicative positioning of the internal access track and proposed plots. The plans also show that some trees will be removed, which we've obviously just discussed, but no specific details in the form of tree survey, root protection zones, or canopy spreads have been submitted to provide further detail. The proposed dwellings would be connected to the public water supply network. Foul drainage would be directed to a septic tank, and soakaway and surface water drainage would be dealt with by SUDS. First slide shows the location plans. It shows the area of Flock Loans, mapped and highlighted in red. It's one of the most westerly points in Angus. The Perth and Kinboss boundary can be seen by just sort of very this dotted sort of shaded line. And obviously further to the south, you can see the A90 linking Perth to Dundee. The site plan shows the 10 residential properties currently at Flock Loans. It shows the immediately adjacent properties to the proposed application site marked in red, White Oak House and Stackyard House. And it shows the public road, which is to the north. And again, we can see the trees that we obviously just previously discussed within the site. The indicative layout plan, as you're aware, this is a planning permission in principle, so this is only indicative. It shows 2 plots, one sitting in the north, one sitting in the south, the access coming from the public road and the access track linking both properties. An aerial view of the site. It shows the public road to the north. We can see here. We can see obviously the area of trees within on the edge of the site, to the north with the public road, to the west, and also internally within the site as well. And we can see the properties that are existing at Flock Loans, including the adjacent Stackyard House and White House here. The northern eastern this is actually the western boundary of the site. We can see the public road. You can see the areas of trees to the north of the application site, which sits in beyond these trees, and trees and a post and wire fence bounding the site to the west. The proposed access, there's also an access already in place. You can see this access from the public road. A stone wall delineates the site from the public road, and also there are, as we saw previously with the previous side, a number of trees along that road frontage, including 2 immediately adjacent to the existing access. The proposed internal driveway or access to plots, sitting to the north within these trees is we can see the gate here, but from the previous slide, which is the access from the public road, and we saw from the indicative layout plan a few slides ago. This area here, which in front of us, would be the proposed access to serve both plots 1 and 2. Indicatively, this would be the area shown in plot 1, sits to the north of this northern part of the site. You can see the post and wire fence of the western boundary with trees to the west. There are obviously a number of small trees within the existing site. This area in front of us here, where the cursor shown, is the area which would be the proposed internal access to the site, the public road and trees to the north of the site here. Indicatively, this would be area for plot 2, shows 1 or 2 more trees. The western boundary shown by the post and wire fence, and you can see it's a grassed garden area. Just for context, this is the White Oak House, which is immediately adjacent to the application site. Access to these existing properties is taken from the public road shown here. To the rear is again to the rear of those properties. Again, the access track continues its line down, but these are the existing properties. Flock Loans immediately looking east, and this is the property known as the Stackyard House, which sat a little bit back from the application site, and again the access track which links to it, which we saw just in the last slide from the main public road. That concludes the presentation, convener. All the papers necessary in front of members, and happy to take any questions if necessary.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Christensen. Questions for Mr. Christensen? Councillor Durno.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. Can you tell me, is the applicant the same person that built the previous houses, and when were the previous houses built?
Thanks, Councillor. I'm not. To be honest, I'm not sure in terms of whether it's the same applicant or not. It possibly is. It's probably the same landowner. I think those houses that we're talking about were built in the early 2000s. I think post 2002. I think.
Yeah. Can I get a wee supplementary on that? Yeah.
When you go, Councillor. No, I mean, I'm conscious there is a little bit of planning history on this one, isn't there? In the report, there were several applications submitted and then not got taken forward, I think, from what I could see. But that might I don't know. I can't remember what the dates were on those, but you might be worth looking at those.
But certainly the overall development, of the 10 houses was certainly post 2002. That was I think it was previously, I think, a farm area, and I think that was a redevelopment of that area.
Would this development come under the policy for affordable houses? Because obviously on the plans, the houses look like they're as grand as the houses that are there at the moment. I wondered if the policy with the over 10 houses and some of them have to be affordable, would that come into play on this? That's why I was asking if it was the same planner that was involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's a good question. I think that's not been. I think probably given the lapse in time, I think that's probably difficult to, and obviously the change in policy context, that would be a difficult one to link the two together. Would be my assessment on that. But it is a good question based upon the development contribution policy that is in place.
Okay, that was a good thought, Councillor Dorno. Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the question about rounding off, because that's mentioned within here and has been discussed previously, and it's a challenging one, I think. So I wanted to know whether or not this one would count as a rounding off, or what their kind of consideration would be.
Thank you, Councillor Dorn. I think, as again, a good question, and it's probably an important question to ask, because you'll be aware MPF 4 Policy 17 and Policy TC2, while there are generally compatibilities between the two policies, the issue in terms of rounding off and gap sites and rounding off on greenfield land is an incompatibility with MPF 4 Policy 17. On that basis, my advice to you would be that the Policy TC2, in terms of rounding off and gap sites for this greenfield land, should not be taken forward on this site, because MPF 4 is now it makes no reference. It's basically MPF 4 does not encourage development in the rural area on greenfield land. That is now the prominent policy, because it is newer than the Angus Local Development Plan. Because of that, I think the rounding off and the gap site part of the greenfield area of TC2 under the current Angus Local Development Plan should be set aside, and the focus should be on what the policy says in MPF 4's Policy 17. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Christensen? I don't think there is. I've got one for you. I mean, the planning report makes mention of, or one of the reasons for rejection is that it's agricultural land. Well, from the slides, it's clearly not an agricultural use. It's effectively, it's got some ornamental trees, and it's clearly not in agricultural use at the moment. That would be correct.
I think that's correct, Convener. I think the report, there is some mention that, obviously, and as I indicated in the presentation, the application form indicates the area is garden ground. I think previously, some time ago, if you look back at historical mapping, it does show the area as sort of agricultural land at one point in time, but I think it's fair to say, as you've suggested, that area of land, regardless, has not been in agricultural use for some time, and the application form indicates it's garden ground, and that certainly would be my view looking at the images that we've gone through.
Yeah, I mean, from the sort of plans we've seen, there's clearly large fields adjacent to this site which clearly are in agricultural use, and you know, practically this bit of ground is probably too small to be sensibly cultivated these days, I would think. It may have been agricultural ground at one point, but I think we've seen sites like this before, and when we actually go and look at them, they're too small to be sensibly called prime agricultural land. So if there's no further questions, really ask members for their views on this one. Do you want to start, Councillor Nicholl? Sorry, do you have enough information to proceed? I need to ask that question. Apologies for not. Councillor McLaren. Were you indicating something, Councillor Nicholl, there?
I was indicating I had enough information.
Okay, but Councillor McLaren is saying he'd like a site visit. That's my personal thing. I would like to see this actually in the flesh, so to speak. I would quite like a site visit. I accept that the interpretation is this is against MPF 4, whatever it is, policy 17. But I think I'd like to see it actually in the flesh, so to speak. So I would certainly support a site visit. Councillor Durno.
Oh, as previously asked, I'd like to have more information to find out if it is the same applicant that built the previous houses. And also, I think a site visit would be good because I'd like to see where the nearest village to that is, because I have a slight problem with if we're allowing more houses to be built, could an applicant come back in another 2 years and ask for another 2 houses, and then before we know it, we've got a village there. So probably a site visit would be good to see what surrounding areas regarding schools, etc. is.
I think the question about liability for playing for a sort of developer contribution is, I don't know whether our legal advisor may be able to give us any light on whether that would be viable or not. I mean, Mr. Christensen's made the point that the previous development was about 20 years ago. We don't know if it was the same developer. We don't know if it was the same landowner. I mean, it's a wee bit like one we had about a year ago in, I think, was it Carnoustie or Monifieth, I think, where there was a kind of similar situation, although I think the time span was much less. So I don't know whether Ms Burns would like to give us any thoughts on that one.
Perhaps additional information might be able to answer that particular question, which is difficult to answer at this stage.
Is that something that between planning and legal we could have a look at that? Is that a possibility?
Certainly, I'd be prepared to discuss it with my planning colleagues. Yes.
Okay, well, that's perhaps something we could have a look at if we are agreed to go for a site visit. Councillor Norton, I see your hands up again.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to raise the issue around insufficient information that's been submitted about the trees, because at the minute the assessment says that it's they've not demonstrated that the proposal complies with NPF 4 policies 4 or 6. So I think then we've got that issue of compliance of the application as it stands. So whether that could be either, if we're doing a site visit, if that can be requested, or we can't, whether or not we can request that at this stage, because for me that's a big one within this decision and the application itself.
Certainly, if we do a site visit, if there are conditions that we think would be, if we were to uphold the appeal, we might want to apply conditions, and it's a wee bit difficult to do that without having seen the site and seen the layout. I think so. I think if you want to look at that, then I think going on a site visit may help.
I just wanted to know that well, I don't know if we can assess that ourselves. I think that there obviously still needs to be further information submitted, because it's about impacts on protected species.
But that could be a condition. That could be a condition, clearly, couldn't it? We could ask for a tree survey to be carried out by a suitable expert, and we normally will include something about whether it's a squirrel survey or a badger survey or whatever it is. We can ask for that to be done, can't we?
Well, I'm not sure whether we need that before we make a decision or not, because sometimes we have had to do that. So I think that's maybe a question for one of the officers on whether.
Mr. Christensen, do you want to come in here?
Yes, Convener, I had my hand up just there. I think Councillor Doran makes a relevant point. I think the I think I mentioned it obviously in one of my previous answers that when you're talking about the principle, you don't know yet whether removal of those trees will have any impact in terms of the principle of development. Probably more pertinent, as Councillor Dorn mentions, the protected species. That's not normally something that you would put in a planning condition. It's not something that's recommended to be put in a planning condition. It would really probably be beneficial to have that kind of information up front. Obviously, as part of this committee, you can request that information at any point in time, but it would be beneficial to have that information up front, because if there was perhaps an issue in terms of there's a bat roost or something, and it's been approved, it's very difficult to then to retrospectively do anything about that. I think so. You would probably want to have that information up front if you can.
What you're really saying is the applicant should have done a protective species survey as part of this planning application. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, there's two things. It could either be a full protected species survey, or it could be information submitted by a suitably qualified person, which assesses whether there's any impact or any known roosts or not. If there's no information, it can be a very simple sort of a survey has been undertaken to come to that conclusion. But I think, when we're talking about the principal development, and there are unknowns about that in terms of we don't know what trees, the impact of those trees coming down would be, and we don't know, or you don't know whether there are any protected species in those areas where the trees may come down. So the applicant obviously would have had an opportunity to submit something, but the information is not in front of you just now.
Okay, so we're slightly in a slightly tricky situation here. We could ask the applicant, or we say to the applicant, you need to go and do this, and we have done that on a. I remember one other one where we did that. There hadn't been a protective species survey, I think, and it hadn't been done, and that was then done before we determined the case. Clearly, the applicant hasn't decided to do this, and certainly from my point of view, I was certainly quite keen to have a site visit to actually look at it in the flesh, so to speak. I guess we're in a slight quandary, I think, here, what we should do. I've got one or two hands up. Mr. Christensen and then Councillor Dorn.
Thanks, convener. I wondered if maybe the legal advisor could perhaps maybe just in terms of whether, obviously information can be, as far as I'm aware, information can be submitted at any point in time. So there'd be nothing stopping members, as far as I'm aware, again, the legal advisor could perhaps assist with whether you could go on a site visit first and have a look at the site and then come back to determine whether you want additional information following that site visit. I don't know if that would be as possible.
Do you want to give us a thought there?
Yes, that's correct. The committee can ask for information at any time before actually reaching a decision.
So that would be a strategy to do the site visit, and then having done that, think, well, do we need some further information, whether that is a tree survey or a protective species information or whatever. Is that, I see you've got your hand up, Councillor Dorn. Would you be comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, what I didn't want us to happen is for us to do a site visit, and then for this not to be able to be determined anyway because of that information, because that's something that I'd be conscious of. I wondered if we can ask for that at this stage rather than having to wait until we've done the site visit, rather than to speed the process up.
I would have thought it's probably better to do the site visit first, because if having done the site visit, we really we could, if having done the site visit, we think we think the application is viable, then we could ask the applicant to do the survey. If we're not so well disposed, then it's asking someone to do a survey which is going to cost them money, and it's probably not going to change their minds, if you know what I mean. So I think we should. I think probably the site visit would be helpful to have first, and then. And again, I can think of a parallel for this where we actually asked for the survey once we'd done the site visit, because the survey hadn't been done, and that hadn't come to light before we did the survey. So that was done after we'd done the site survey. We had to wait for that result before we actually determined the case. So I think if members are agreeable, we do that. We have an unaccompanied site visit to be organised by officers, and we can then, once we've seen it in the flesh, we can then decide at a future meeting what the next course of action should be. So are we happy with that? Yes. Okay.
Yes, Convener, I was just going to clarify that there would be a requirement to reconvene after the site visit prior to any further determination of a requirement for further information. I know that Councillor Durlow's also indicated that she would seek further information as well, but that could be done at any reconvened meeting, if that
That's
would
right.
be.
We could reconvene and then decide whether we want any other additional surveys. And there's this question about the developer contribution, which is a fair point, because that's, I think, the 10 houses is usually the break point on that. So so it could make this one slightly drawn out, but that's kind of where we are. Okay, are we happy with that approach? An unaccompanied site visit, yes, to be organised at our, well, as whenever you can organise it. It's going to be quite difficult, I suspect, with diaries, and we're heading up to Christmas break. So, okay, well, I think if that's clear, we've made a decision there that we'll have an unaccompanied site visit. After that, we'll reconvene, and we may be asking additional information from a couple of parties. So with that, thanks for your attendance this morning, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Stop the live stream, please.